Okay, so here we are. We've done both sides of the chin, jowl type area. And now we're going to do this little tricky part down at the bottom where these two pieces of leather meet up. Now, usually I give quite a bit of extra with the leather, so you see that they overlap. But what you want is for them to just butt right up next to each other. You don't want them to overlap. So there is some trimming that's going to have to happen here. So I'm just going to lay this down like that and kind of estimate about where my midpoint is. So some nice sharp scissors, and I'm just going to trim a nice straight line. And sometimes if it's a little bit crooked, you can trim it after you get it down. So that looks pretty good to me there. So I don't know if you can see that, but as I was rolling it down, this part pushed in a little bit. So now your line isn't really quite straight. But that's no problem. You just go with a with your sharp X-Acto knife, and we're just going to give that a little trim. There. So if you can see now, that's a much straighter line. What I do is I will take a little spudger tool, this one or the green one, and I'll just find where the seam is, and I'll just kind of try and mark it a little bit and see if I can get kind of, you're not really scoring it, but you're just kind of indenting it, I guess, a little bit. This is how I do it. If you got an easier way to do it that way. But this is just my technique. This is important that you don't cut too much off here. If you cut off too much off, then you won't be able to stretch it over enough. So I'll just right on my edge where I've made that little indent, I'll just cut. Okay, so that should line up. So I'm a little bit, not short, but just a little bit tight there. A little bit tight. Everything else is looking good. So this part's just a touch tight. So I'm going to start up top here because I was a little bit, I just need to stretch it over a little bit. So I'm going to get that part all the way over and line it up. And then I'll continue to just kind of stretch it over and try and get it just right lined up. So there's your seam. So I mean, you can see it, but it's once we weather it, I'll show you how to weather it. The weathering sort of stuff that I use, I don't include in the kit, but I'll show you where you can get it. Once you get the weathering on there, it hides quite well. Next, we're going to tuck these little pieces in, and I'm going to try and use the contact cement for this and see if it's going to be any, I don't know, any easier, or if it's just about the same as the other. So this, again, you might want to trim away some of this bulk. You only need about 1/2 inch or 3/4 of an inch to tuck in. So I'm going to trim that and this. We're just going to tuck that in. Oh yeah, much easier. So you can see there's a little bit of a fold right there. Take your little spudger tool and just try and push that down if you can. You can use your little tool or your fingers, whatever. Next thing we're doing is we're going to, we've got all these flappy pieces that need to be tucked up into the helmet. And this part's pretty easy until we get back to this part with the coming into here, because it likes to bunch and fold, and ideally you do not want any folds on your leather coming down here. Okay, so this is the inside of the helmet. We're going to be tucking this leather up inside, but you can't tuck it all in one piece. It's too tight here, so you're going to have to notch it out. And for this part I use just hot glue. So I usually notch it in a couple places. So the first is I notch it kind of just about here. So I'll notch it again, don't notch it all the way, just about like that, and that way it'll fold up. And then the next place I'm going to notch it is just a little bit of the ways down right there. Okay, so that way these will fold up way easier. The other place I notch it is just kind of right as just about an inch or two in from where it starts going up, and I'll just notch it kind of like that. So I'll just show you how I do the first bit. So I'll just start on this one right here. It really doesn't matter which flap you start on, just so long as you leave this. Don't do this yet, because this part is the most difficult probably of the leather install. So you're going to take your hot glue, and I put it just kind of right on the helmet, just one little bead at a time. And then I'll just push it up with my thumb, spreading the glue up as I push it up. And then I'll just hold that down, and I'll do another bead just right up kind of underneath it. And then I'll push that down again, kind of pushing the glue as I push it up. And chances are you'll burn your fingers, like I always do, because as you push it out it might seep out near the edge and get on your fingers. We've come to this back part now. First thing I'm going to do is, this is a lot of excess. Like you get a lot of excess on the back here. So I'm actually going to trim quite a lot of this away. So I'm going to just, start by trimming some of that. And then down in this corner, that's a lot of excess as well. So I'm going to start by this little piece right here, kind of cutting that away. The idea is to try and get it out as much bulk as you can, because if you had a lot of bulk tucking down into here, you'll get lots of little folds and stuff. So I'm just gonna start cutting away carefully. Okay, so that looks pretty good. We're going to, with some contact cement, do this part right here, and make sure when we put it up, it's sitting totally flat on that part, okay? With no folds anywhere. Okay, so we're just ready to push this up. Now again, you want to push it up so there's no folds in it. So you're just going to work your way up and push it so it's totally flat against that back part. So you can see how that, we've got that pushed up and it's just flat, okay? It's totally flat against there. Alright, now here comes the tricky part. You see how it's going to bunch up now. As soon as you can see that there's just lots of excess material there. So when you push it in, you might get folds. But if you've done it right, and you've got it flat here, it should push in pretty easy. Now, I've got to tell you, sometimes I do these and they push in. Like this one's going to go in super easy. Look how easy that's going to go in. No folds, no nothing. But I'm going to start right down in this corner because that's where all the bulk is. And this is where, again, your little spudger tool is probably going to help you out. I'm going to put a fair amount of this hot glue down here so that I don't have to come back and do it again. A couple squirts anyways. Okay. And then I'm going to tuck that down. So now I'm going to continue on up this way and get that glued up behind inside the helmet. So that's done. I'll show you what the inside looks like. You can see that. So that's all just been pushed down. Nice and snug. You can see there's no folds. That's what you want. That looks awesome. Really good. Really good. I'm pushing that in and you got all that sort of bulk right there. So what I'll do is I'll kind of take the largest of the bulky bits, so it's like kind of like that, and I'll notch it. So I'll notch that just a little ways up. So I've got a little notch there, then I'll cut it away, just going like that, and I'll cut it away. And that should help. Yeah, that helps a little bit with that, the bulk there. And then there's another little bit right here. I'm going to just notch it, just kind of cut it away a little bit. Again, be careful that you don't cut away too much. So now that's coming down. Okay, a little bit of hot glue and we'll glue this down. We're going to start down here in this corner again. so we can get all that bulk in. You can see how I've pushed that in and there's no folds now. It's a nice smooth line. Now, even without weathering it, this isn't quite the right color for the Boushh helmet. In my opinion, it needs to be a little bit darker. It's a good start, but I wouldn't leave it like this. I would weather it a little bit further. I mean, it looks good and all, but you can really step up your game a little bit if you weather it a little bit, and I'm going to show you how to do that as well. I don't supply any of the weathering materials when you purchase the kit, but that's something that you can do on your own, and there's more than one way you can do it as well. So this part of the video, it's not really have to do with the leather install, but this is just for those that want to weather this a little bit. When you're thinking about, you know, the Star Wars universe and bounty hunters and things like that, this has got to look like a well-used, worn-in helmet. And so I think if you leave this, it's not going to look quite right. And so I like to weather it. And so how I do that is I just take a little bit of sandpaper. This is 220. A little bit of sandpaper, and just very lightly, like you don't have to do hardly any, but very lightly I'll just kind of rub on some of these corners. Because, I mean, that's where your helmet's going to wear, is on the edges, right? And so this is a helmet that has obviously been in it's got battle scars, it's got dents, you know, paint chipping on it. If this doesn't match your paint, it's not going to look right. You really don't need a lot. I find that less is more when it comes to doing these helmets. You can really get carried away with some things, like your battle scars, and you know, it's easy just to go overboard. So don't go overboard with your sanding or anything. After you're done doing your sanding, I'll show you what I use to kind of further weather this. This is the same wash that I use on my helmet as well. And I also get this on Hobby Link. I'll maybe set up a link as well in the description. So you'll need a paintbrush about this size or bigger if you want. I think you probably use about one bottle for your leather. But again, it's always good to maybe have more than one. When you do your wash, you just brush it on. Careful not to get it on the helmet. I mean, not that it matters too much, but I would say just try not to get it on the helmet. I also like to have a little, just a shop rag, just to kind of smooth it out a little bit as well. So here's the helmet after I've weathered it. You can see it just gives a lot of nice just depth, I think, to the helmet. Makes it look like it's really been worn, really been, you know, out in the elements and stuff like that. I mean, it makes it just adds an extra layer of authenticity, I think, to it. Now, I'm not quite done with the weathering yet. I also like to, I love adding a little bit of spatter to it. I'll just show you right here. So that's the line down that way. What I was mentioning, I love to add like spatter to the leather. I also add it to the helmet in some places, like back here, just a little bit of spatter and stuff like that. I think that also really adds to just the overall feel of the helmet. I think it makes it just stand out. So I'll just take my paintbrush, a little bit of water, a little bit of paintbrush, and I'll actually create some drips. And then I don't want it to be too, just want it to be subtle. So I'll just take it and kind of dab it a little bit. Then I'll also, a little bit of spatter like that, just up on the helmet. So this is where I stop for now, because now I have to install lenses and the electronics and the rangefinder that goes right up there. So I can't do anything now for a day or two until I get those pieces in. But once I get those pieces in, we'll continue on with our leather install tutorial. So this is the piece for the neck cowl that comes in the kit. So anyways, there's a little bit of work to be done on this. Just on finishing the seams. I don't do that part. That's something that you can do. And what I do is I just run a bead of hot glue there, then I just fold that seam down, and then I do the same on the other side. And then up here, I finish the seam off up there as well. So for this next part, when you are putting the seam up like that, so what I'll do is I just measure 1 inch up, and that'll be my guide for how much I fold it. This makes it a little bit easier. So when you are folding it up, you'll just bring it up to where the line is. So I like to just start at the center and then work my way down.